Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another edition of Eclectrocasts. This is Eclectrocast number 33, and this is Case. Jeff is not here today. He's out for work, and I'm meeting with Marco Alessi. Marco Alessi does his own work under the name Cryxuss. He runs Naviar Records and the Naviar Haiku and Renku groups. Well, welcome, Marco.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Case. Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me.
Well, it's a distinct pleasure. We've been exchanging emails and music for a couple of years now, and so it's very exciting to speak with you personally. and I've been waiting for this for a bit, and we've finally been able to catch you and arrange this interview.
It's a pleasure.
Good. So. We started the podcast with the track Absorption Lines, which is from your album Apnea. I guess that's how we pronounce it in the United
that's
States.
Correct.
And that's of your solo work from Cryxuss. How did you start in music? How did you get going?
I come from a family of musicians. So my mother was a piano teacher and a singer. So I personally started playing music when I was around 14 or 15 years old. I started playing in a band at the beginning. I was a drummer, and then I started developing some interest in piano and synthesizers as well. So I started making my own music and started composing more complex textures. So that's how Cryxuss started. That's how the project started. And Absorption Lines is compositions I made recently. I made, I think, in late 2016. And it's a composition I made when I started being interested in more complex textures rather than just ambient textures. So I started adding some rhythms, I started adding some field recordings as well. So it's a sort of evolution compared to my previous compositions, or that's how I feel it.
So what influenced you? Like, what music did you listen to when you started to develop this interest in ambient music, acoustic, electric music, electronic music? What were you listening to, and how did that influence your work?
Well, my interest in music in general. So I started as a fan of hard rock music, especially during my teenage
Me
years.
too.
And then I don't know what happened really, but I was listening one day. I remember, especially William Basinski, or let's say these ambient composers that really inspired me, and I thought, okay, I really want to do something like that. And so I started playing around with the instruments, but it was a very organic evolution in a way. I was just trying to create something similar to these musicians, to these composers, and then all of a sudden I found myself making albums inspired by them.
Nice. So I mean, I have a big smile on my face because in the 60s and 70s when I was a kid, I listened to Deep Purple, Black Sabbath. Hard rock is a term that's you don't hear much anymore. And then I ended up playing in a band, and we played more of a rock fusion music, and they people asked us what style is your music, so we called it gentle rock instead of hard rock. So it's a little gentler, a little bit more subtle, a little less hormone driven, I guess.
That sounds like a very interesting genre. I would definitely listen to something called gentle rock.
Well, I got it. I listened a lot to a English band called Gentle Giant. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Oh yeah.
And that's where we sort of got the idea of calling it gentle rock, a little bit more,
Okay.
intelligent, I guess, a little bit more complex.
Mm.
But there's some metal music out now that is pretty complex
Mm.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that rock music and metal music is changing too. I think that
Hmm.
personally, I think that in the 90s and the 2000, metal music didn't change
Uh-huh.
that much, didn't evolve that much. But now I think that somehow it's finding a way to
Hmm.
evolve itself. So I'm very looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in the
Uh-huh.
next few years.
So you started talking about your track absorption lines and your interest in the layers of music, and it seems to me that you also are very deliberate in assigning certain frequency bands to these layers so they don't become muddled together. Can you talk a little bit
Mm.
about both your composition and how you mix these things?
Yeah. So, well, it's a very I find it a very
Uh-huh.
natural evolution. Most of the times, I just sit down in front of my keyboard and I find a note that
Uh-huh.
inspires me at the beginning, and then maybe in a matter of minutes, sometimes in a matter of hours, sometimes in a matter of days, I just start creating different layers that somehow are
Uh-huh.
suitable. It's it's a very natural construction most of the times. I try to find frequencies that um, can be connected to each other, but at the same times that they are not
Uh-huh.
perfect with each other. So I just wanna create a kind of a feeling of
Mhm. Mhm.
discrepancy in a way. So not just a
Uh-huh.
perfect connection between two
Right.
different notes, but a more a sort of a
Uh-huh.
break, a
And also
distance.
that's a way of getting attention for the note, right? Is to is to not
Yes,
let it
absolutely,
go to the next expectation, but to sort of defy the expectation, and it sort of veers
exactly.
you out and makes you listen.
Absolutely. The only thing I don't want to is to people to know
Right.
exactly what's going to happen next. So I want people to be
Uh-huh.
caught off guard
Uh-huh.
all the time. So that's I, I don't do it. I don't do
Mhm.
it purposely most of the times. It's just the fact that I like people to be
Uh-huh.
engaged all of the time. I don't want people to just be I want people to be absorbed by the music, but not um,
Uh-huh.
to start thinking about other things. I want
Right.
them to be focused on the music
Right.
while
So
they
one of the
listen to it.
things that struck me is that not in all of your work, and you have put out 3 albums so far as Crisis,
Yeah, that's correct.
um, that there is some work has distinct melody to it, but many of your pieces are more drawn out. The notes last for a long time, sometimes 5, 6, 10 bars, and they sort of weave into each other. It weaves into the next note. There's not clearly one note from the other. So discovering a melody is more of a requires the listener to engage for a longer term. And so, what is
Yeah.
what is the role of melody in your work?
Um, the I what I like about these long notes is the fact that they start
Uh
at
huh.
different moments and then somehow they
Uh huh.
they
Mm-hmm.
meet at a certain point, and then they
Uh huh.
separate and then they meet again. So what I like is the fact that notes
Uh huh.
are
Nice.
alone in a way, but then all of a sudden
Uh huh.
they meet and they create something. They create something that even I
Uh huh.
don't expect sometimes. So
Uh huh.
they are alive in a way, so they can choose when and how to meet. Sometimes the result interesting. Sometimes the result is unexpected. Sometimes the
Uh-huh.
result is not as good as I was expecting it. But I really like to give freedom
Uh-huh.
to the
Yeah.
notes
I
in
really,
a
I
way.
mean, I was very taken by saying the notes are alive and like they have a mind and a will of their own in a way. Yeah. So, the way you're
Yeah.
talking about how a piece develops sounds very Baroque to me. Like Baroque music has, it's very melody based, but they have usually two and sometimes more melodies that seem to be going their own ways and then occasionally come together.
Yes, yes, that's true. I'm not a particular fan of Baroque music, but in this case, yes, it's true. There is a similarity between the
Uh-huh.
way I compose
Yeah.
and Baroque music.
Interesting.
So
So there are some other elements. Like you said, you use some rhythmic elements with field recordings.
mhm,
But something that strikes me is that you choose a lot of sounds that are kind of like wind blowing through a tube, or like wind or
mhm,
breath in a bottle, or something tubular, glassy stuff. Not glassy high pitch, but glassy dark breath kind of a feel.
yeah.
What's your attraction to these
Mm.
sort of tubular glassy sounds? And I don't mean tubular glassy literal. It's just, for a lack of finding a better word, they're breathy
Mm.
tubular sounds, I think.
I think it's a good way
Uh-huh.
of calling them. I personally, I think that everything started because I wanted to add some
Uh-huh.
rhythm to my music, but I didn't want to use traditional percussions. So probably because I come from a background
Mm-hmm.
as a drummer, so I was trying to find alternative ways of creating uh, percussions, of creating
Mm-hmm.
drums. So I started experimenting with these sounds, with these tubular sounds, and this is the result. I find it quite interesting because it gives me a lot of
Uh-huh.
space for
Right.
interpretation.
So we talked about the long extended notes and weaving into each other. We talked about the different layers and the clarity in your work. There's another element that I find very interesting that creates a lot of movement in your work. So the notes create movement, but over a very long period of time, or over a long period of time. But there is more immediate movement, and I have a feeling that your affinity or your background as a drummer, you can't quite hide that altogether. You use a lot of rotating panning, or panning things from the left to the right and back and forth, and a sense of rotation. So there's this
Mhm.
sense of undulation in your work, this sense of a wave
Mm.
movement. And
Yeah,
you use it frequently. What is your attraction to that?
I think it's because I like the idea of creating a sort of
Uh-huh.
cinematic experience with my music. I want it to be I want it to be an
Mm-hmm.
absorbing experience in a way. So the fact that sound is moving from one
Uh-huh.
ear to the other, it kind of keeps the tension high. So, or at least this is the way
Uh-huh.
I expect it to work. So I think that the main reason why I use that is because I want to create a cinematic experience
Oh, nice.
of sort.
So, Jeff sent me some questions, and I think I sent you a question too. We sort of both picked up on your sense of cinema, of the
Mm,
visual, actually. And
mm,
we'll talk about this a little later, but you also always include a visual, a picture, when you send out a haiku poem. Um,
mhm.
so, can you talk a little bit about the visual aspect of your work?
The visual has always been quite important for me. I always like to think of my music as a soundtrack.
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting to combine different art forms. So to combine music with different art
Uh-huh.
forms is always something that I found
Yeah.
interesting. especially with my music. The first album I ever recorded is entitled Hari, which is the female main character of Solaris, which is a novel by Stanisław Lem, and then it was also adapted into a movie. I don't know. It's probably because I really like movies. I like cinema in general, and it's interesting to see how soundtracks sometimes can add value to the visual of a movie, and sometimes it becomes the most important part of the movie itself. So it's something I've always found fascinating, and I think that my music has always been affected by this.
And then the music can recreate the image for you, right, without seeing it. So do you do any filming yourself?
Not really. Apart from the filming I do for Naviar Records, so some trailers, some excerpts. No, I don't do filmmaking.
But you do photography, right?
From time to time, yes.
All right.
I can see that you did some research.
I try to. So why don't we take a listen to This Will Be My Last Submersion, which comes from your album Ethereal Creature. And I think it would be interesting after our conversation that we just had for people to listen to these elements that we've been talking about. You know, the layers, the extended notes, the rhythms that come in with the field recordings, and the undulation of the back and forth, or the weaving motion, almost like a wave-like motion. And then we'll talk a little bit more about some of your solo work. So everybody, we're going to listen to a track from Ethereal Creature by Marco Alessi, who publishes his work on the name Cryxuss. The track is called This Will Be My Last Submersion. So, Marco, why is it called This Will Be My Last Submersion?
Well, the idea was to, I was imagining myself sinking in a way. So I was trying to recreate this with sounds, and as you might have noticed, the end of the song is slightly different from the rest of the song. There is a
Yes, there's a piano coming in.
yeah. The piano song is the idea of coming back to life in a way. So it's it's a journey. It's music that tries to describe a personal journey, and the end of the journey is the piano.
And which is announced by sort of crackly noises, these rhythmic crackly noises, and then out of that is the piano emerging, right?
Yeah. Exactly, yes, because the crackling sounds are let's call it a barrier between the journey, between the problems that you might come across during a journey, and the piano is the moment of enlightenment, the moment you realize that you're at the end of a journey, and in between these two moments there is a barrier of some sort, which is represented by these crackling sounds.
I really love that track, and thank you for sharing that with all of us. On your Twitter page, you state that, I'm paraphrasing, jumping from failure to failure with undiminished enthusiasm. I think a lot of us who are creative and who engage in creativity can identify with that. Art is a lot like that. I learned this from my wife, Suzanne, a long time ago when she was throwing out her work. And I saw it in the garbage, and she said, "You are not allowed to have any of that. It has to go." So, so what is the value of failure for you?
It has an immense value, I think. I think probably failure is the most important part of the life of an artist in general, but not only. As a matter of fact, this sentence was said by a scientist. Which unfortunately I don't remember his name, but he was trying to find the God particle, so-called, which was discovered a couple of years ago. So after probably we looked for it for probably 50 years, and then all of a sudden we found it. So this scientist was saying that the talent of a scientist is to be able to jump from failure to failure with undiminished enthusiasm, and which basically means to keep trying, keep failing, and be able to just start again. And I think it's the most important and the most difficult part of the life of an artist, of a scientist, of of anyone really, to be able to just do what we love, and even when we are unhappy or not satisfied with what we do, to just keep trying. So
so the living is in the journey, not in the destination, right?
Exactly. Sometimes people sometimes we just give up, or we don't really give ourselves a chance to do what we love, or we say, I'm gonna do it later. In my case, for example, as an artist, most of the times I find myself doing other things rather than making music, because I think, okay, no, I would rather do something else, something more useful. Useful for who? My artistic self is important for me, so I should always find the time to make, and I think this is an important part of should be an important part of everyone's life.
So this idea of this idea of art for yourself, for art as being alive, being a living creative person. On the other side, you also have a very strong sense of collaboration. and I think your Naviar Records and Naviar Haiku group, and now also Naviar Renku, I think, um, ha- has sort of emerged out of that, right? So you've been doing that for 3 years now.
For 3 years, yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the value of collaboration for you?
Obviously, collaboration is important, but this is a personally, I believe that with the tools that we have nowadays, collaboration should be part of our daily life, especially as creatives. With all the tools and softwares, and everything is interconnected now. We should be able to make more together, and it shouldn't be a lonely experience to make music. It should be a collaborative process. So when I realized that what I thought was that more collaboration was needed, I tried to find ways to encourage this collaboration, especially this collaboration online. So that's how the Haiku Challenge and the Renku Challenge started.
Where does your interest in haikus and renkus and in general Japanese literature and poetry come from?
It was very random, really. I was 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't know anything about haiku poetry, but then one day I was in this coffee shop in Italy, and in this coffee shop there was a small library, and I just saw this book about haiku poetry. And obviously I heard about haiku poetry before, but I didn't know anything about it. So I just started reading it, and one thing that surprised me from the very start was the fact that haiku poetry really allows the reader to interpret the work. It really allows the reader to find his or her own interpretation. So in my own personal experience, when I was reading a haiku poem at the beginning, the first thing that came into my mind was a visual thing. So most of the times it was a picture, an image of something. So I thought, well, maybe it might work with music as well. So what about, instead of adding value by adding something visual, what about we try with something like sounds? So that's how the Haiku Challenge started. I wanted to find a way to not just to make music in response to a haiku, but to add value to the haiku itself.
Right. So to take it sort of out of taking the haiku literal and rather make it personal and transcend the meaning into a personal meaning. And then your quest is, how can you do that through music?
Exactly, that's correct.
But by adding the image in, and I sort of alluded to that earlier in our talk, is you actually look for marriage between both the spoken word or the written word. Then you choose an image to go with that. And then you invite people to add music to it. So it's really a marriage of three elements then, right?
Yes, that's true. To be honest with you, I was really undecided at the beginning of the project, of the haiku project. I didn't know whether I wanted it to be just a poem or a poem plus image. And then I started with poem and image, and it worked. So I kept it that way. But I've been undecided for some time, and even now I still think that maybe a haiku would be just enough. But then I think that sometimes we need something visual as well. So I kept it that way. The way I see the haiku challenge is really like I just want to offer people a space where they can create. So, but it's true in a way that somehow the way I tailored this project affects the music I receive.
So I think everybody knows what a haiku is, and maybe you talked a little bit about sort of running into haiku accidentally. Or coincidentally, maybe.
Maybe.
But haiku is I mean, at least in the traditional style, is very constrained by the number of syllables, right, in each phrase.
Yep.
So it has a rhythm to it.
Yes. Well, this is the traditional, so you're referring to the traditional haiku poetry. Most of the poems that I published do not follow this traditional style, but some of them do. Yes. Yeah, the first line has 5 syllables. The second one has 7, and the third one has 5 again. This is the traditional form of haiku poetry.
And so it's interesting because they're odd numbers, and in Western cultures we're much more focused to even rhythms. But it does give a sense of rhythm, and I think these shorter pieces do invite rhythmic thinking or rhythmic compositions. And it certainly has for me. Not all the time. The last piece that I recently put up is not really a rhythm, at least not intended to be based on rhythm. So I think for some artists that's maybe an attraction to a haiku. It is also not a lot to read, and so for people with short attention spans, it's really helpful. So what's the difference between a haiku and a renku?
Well, a renku is a collaborative poem. So usually there are 2 or more poets who gather together and make a poem. So there is the first poet writes the first 3 lines, and then the second poet writes the following 2 lines, and then the third one writes the following 3 lines. So there is and then it becomes a chain, and obviously all the lines have to be connected, and so the following lines have to be connected to the previous ones, and it can really go on forever. And it was created by Matsuo Basho, who was a very important figure in haiku poetry, Japanese poet living in the 16th century. And so renku actually was the renku poetry was born before haiku poetry. Haiku poetry is actually the first 3 lines of a renku poem is what became haiku poetry.
Oh, interesting.
After. So renku started before, and then as something to do by themselves, poets decided to use haiku poetry as well.
So it's a cyclical thing. So they do 3 lines, 2 lines, 3 lines, and then they start over, right? Yes. That goes back to the first person.
Yes, that's correct.
And so it can just continue like that until they feel like they're done.
Yeah. Well, if I remember well, I hope I'm not mistaken, I think it was there were 33. They were going to do this cyclical process 33 times. So yeah, and then they would start again with another rank.
So let's talk a little bit about your Naviar Records label. You've been putting out collections of, I think, 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 albums of...
I think 12, if I remember well.
But you have recently, and I think 2 things have happened. You have put together a 3-year compilation, of which I'm proud to have a track on there.
Yes.
And now you're also starting to do solo releases. So can you talk a little bit about why did you start the Naviar Records? Did that grow out of the haiku group, or what was your main idea behind that?
Well, it started as I think it started as an organic evolution. Thanks to the haiku challenge and thanks to all the challenges I've created with Naviar, I met a lot of artists, and I've listened to a lot of music that I really liked. So at some point I thought I decided that I wanted to collaborate with some of these artists, and I wanted to help them release their music and publish their music, or even help them curate some of their music. So I just started getting in touch with some of these participants in the challenges, asking them whether they would be interested in releasing music under Naviar Records, and I received some very positive answers,
Okay.
and so that's how it started.
Well, I mean, I for one want to thank you for doing it, because I think the collections are all very, very interesting, and it's such a, it's so interesting every week to see the enormous diversity of responses to, a 3-line poem. It is stunning. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm always surprised, and I'm always grateful also, because one thing is to publish an album, is to publish a haiku poem every Wednesday, and another thing is to see how people respond to this poem. It's amazing. The music every day, every week. I find myself listening to this music and thinking, "Wow, it's after 3 years, it's always a pleasure to just sit down and listen to the responses I receive."
Why do you only give a week? I mean, again, this is another constraint, right? This is the teacher in you, Marco. For the Renkus, you allow 2 weeks before you put up a new one, and for the haikus, 1 week. So, what was your thinking behind that?
There are two main reasons behind the time frame. Well, the first thing is that haiku poetry is a poetry which is about immediacy. So it really describes a moment. It's and that's the beauty of it. It's the fact that it has to be just a sudden moment that you describe quickly before you forget it, and there is not that much thought there. You don't need to think about it too much. It's just something you see and something you want to represent, or something you want to describe. And in the same way, I want people to not to think too much about the music they make in response to the poem. I want people to just feel the poem and describe it using sounds. So and that's why I decided to give a 7-day time frame, because I think I don't want people to feel like they have to make music as fast as quickly as possible. So I didn't want to give like a 48 hours deadline, but I wanted participants to have time to think about it and make music, but at the same time I wanted them to know that they have 7 days and no more than that. So this is the first reason. And the second one is because I think that for an artist in general, it's important to have a deadline. So to know that you have to complete something by next Wednesday, let's say. So I think it's important to know when to stop, or that you have to stop before then.
And also, it doesn't have to be a perfect piece. It just has to be a response, right? It's more like a response than anything else, right?
Exactly. It's very natural. It's it doesn't have to be a sophisticated piece. It has to be just natural, something that comes out spontaneously.
Nice. So so you've also you've had your first solo artist album on Naviar Records by Sevenism.
Yes. By Sevenism.
So what made you decide to start doing solo projects with artists?
Well, it's as I said, I think that it was mostly because I wanted to start collaborating with these artists on a deeper level. I just wanted to first of all try to promote them, especially because I think that most of the artists that participate in the projects are really good artists. So I just wanted them to be seen or to be noticed by as many people as possible. So I'm using Naviar Records as a way for these artists to be seen as a. So as for Sevenism, I've been in touch with him. I was in touch with him for very long times, and then at some point I just asked him whether he could be interested in releasing an album under Naviar Records, and he was excited about it. So we just made this album and released it.
And you also released it on cassette, right?
Yeah, that's true, on a limited edition cassette, and yeah, and I like the format. I like cassettes. I don't know why. When I started thinking about physical release, I just thought, what about cassette? It's something unusual. You know? There is this vinyl comeback, which sounds incredible in a way, but people like vinyl, and people are still buying vinyl, which makes me very happy. And CDs, I'm not really attracted to CDs for some reasons. Maybe because I still find them very, very common in a way. So there is not this feeling like vinyl or cassette of something delicate, of something rare. So at the end, I decided
they're also an interesting object. Cassette is an interesting object in itself, I think, more so than any of the other forms. I still have tons and tons of cassettes. So on the 3-year album, I think you have the 3 years of Naviar Haiku. I think you have 60 tracks. 60 tracks.
That's correct.
And you selected one for us from Earthborn Visions, and the track is called Ovoid Cashew. Can you talk a little bit about that track and let everybody know, what interests you in that piece?
Okay. Well, Earthborn Visions is an artist I really, really like in general, and I definitely recommend. So if you have the chance, just go visit his SoundCloud profile because he's very talented. What I like the most about his music is its depth. His music is very deep, and I always find fascinating the way he creates ambient textures using different layers, using different tones, and it's almost hypnotizing, his music. So that's what I like about it. I like the fact that it's absorbing me in a very deep level.
That's hypnotizing. I think is a very good description.
Hypnotizing?
Yeah, absolutely. Way, no, I agree with you. For me, the track, I think there are some similarities with your work because we'll listen to it in just a little bit. The track is very sharply panned. And on the left and on the right, there's stuff going on with reverb and delay and distortion. Those are 3 very big elements in this track. And that is what I found sort of, almost like a punk ambient music, right? For lack of a better word, because, these reverbs and delays are they're not loud, but they're heavily distorted, very distorted.
Yeah.
And so I found that very interesting about this track. By the way, Earthborn Visions just today followed Eclectrocasts, and we followed right back. So looking forward to learn more about Earthborn Visions.
That's great.
So let's have a listen to it. Would you announce it? Okay.
Yeah, of course. This is Earthborn Visions, Ovoid Cashew.
You have put out some teaser tracks of a new solo album that you're about to publish in February, I think, by, I'm
Yes,
assuming, a
exactly.
Japanese artist. I'm going to do my best here. Hirotaka Shirotsubaki.
Hirotaka Shirotsubaki.
So this artist is putting out an album on your label called Wet Petals. And you've
Yes.
brought to us a track called Downstairs. So can you talk a little bit this artist and your choice for doing a solo album on Naviar Records?
Yes, I met. I've never seen him face to face, but I was listening to his music on SoundCloud. I was listening to Hirotaka's on SoundCloud, and what surprised me the most about his music was his ability to create these long textures that were never boring, obviously, but they were also so positive textures. So sometimes I notice with ambient music, ambient music sometimes, especially with long tracks, it can inspire some negative thinking, or not even negative thinking, but just sometimes when you think about things for too long or too much, you tend to see everything negative. And with Hirotaka's music, what I notice is that his approach is very positive. He has a very positive approach to life and to nature. And in fact, this album that we are about to release on the 9th of February, Wet Petals, is inspired by childhood memories and his relationship with nature, especially when he was a child.
So we're going to ride out with that track Downstairs. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you to tell everybody, where can they find your products, your work?
My work as Naviar Records products. Well, we have a website. I have a website. It's naviarrecords.com. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud. I have a Bandcamp page as well, where you can find all the compilations and solo material as well, solo albums. All the compilations are free to download, so just feel free to download. And the solo releases are I think £3 each.
And I believe £6 for the cassette, right?
And £6 for the cassette. Yes, that's correct.
And you also have an artist webpage for your Cryxuss, for your own work, right? You are on Twitter also as yourself.
I'm on Twitter as myself. I have a Bandcamp page as Cryxuss, and I have a website actually. It's more of a blog really, where I keep all my projects, such as music or photography, or even sometimes videos, especially for Naviar Records. So it's you can find it just by following me on Twitter. You can find all the information.
Okay. What is important to you in the music you choose to release on your Naviar label, and what attracts you to the artists on your label?
That's a very interesting question, and it's a very I think it's something that happens on a subconscious level most of the times. I just listen to music, and sometimes I come across something that strikes me. In the case of Hirotaka, or in the case of Sevenism, or in the case of Earthborn Visions, I listen to their music and I feel something that connects me to their music. It's most of the times it's because I feel this depth. I feel that their music is deep. It's trying to tell me something. So, but it's a very difficult thing to describe. Sometimes it's, I don't know about you, but for me it's difficult to understand why music why music inspires me sometimes. It's very hard to define what makes us feel something when we listen to music, and when sometimes we don't feel anything, while maybe we should, you know.
But it is the feeling that is your thermometer, right? That is what, you know, hooks you in, is your feeling.
Yes.
And it sounds also,
Yes.
It seems to me like you were saying that you have a sense also that their music is thoughtful, that it is not just patched together from clips, but that a lot of thought went into it. You know, besides the emotion and the creativity, it is also thoughtful.
Yes, that's correct. When I work with an artist on a release, it's always important for me to understand where the music is coming from. So I always want to know what this composition means for the artist, because this is part of I think this is part of the work of a curator, to understand what the artist is trying to express, and try to find a way to better represent, or to best represent the final result.
So where's Naviar Records going? Where do you see the future? If I talk to you in 2 years, what will we be talking about?
Well, I think we will be talking about Naviar Records releasing albums on a regular basis. So promoting the artists that participate in its projects. So this is something that I really wanna expand. This is something that it's really important for me, for the project right now. Obviously, there will still be the Haiku Challenge for as long as people are interested in it. I really like it, and it gave me it's giving me the chance to meet so many interesting artists and musicians and poets. I'm thinking about starting a new project. So at the moment, the Renku Challenge is the Renku Challenge stopped in December because there has been other things, like the 3-year anniversary compilation, and then next month there will be Hirotaka's album. So, but it might start again in a few months. In the meantime, I'm also considering other projects as well. Obviously, as always, focused on the connection between poetry and music. And I'm also considering the possibility of organizing an event.
Oh,
but
cool!
This is it's still a work in progress. Possibly an event online. So, or I don't know really. I'm still working on this, but there will probably be an event of some sort.
So I am very, very thrilled that you're thinking about that, and you know, feel free to call on people, you know, to support you with that and help you with that. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and to talk with the Eclectrocasts. It's been a distinct pleasure. I've been wanting to talk to you for a very long time, and it finally happened. So I feel like I have a new friend here. And
you do absolutely.
And everybody, I've been talking with Marco Alessi. Marco Alessi publishes his own music, under the artist name Cryxuss, and he runs the Naviar Haiku group, and runs and operates a label, an independent label called Naviar Records. It's been our distinct pleasure talking to you, Marco, and we hope to do this again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Thank you very much.
So we're going to ride out with Downstairs from the album Wet Petals, that's going to be released on Naviar Records on February the 9th by Hirotaka Shirotsubaki. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.